Welcome, everybody, to Today in Space. This week, we're going to have another segment of People of Science where we discuss, we talk to people who are actually working in the industry, who have worked in the industry, and talk about what they're doing right now, and also their origin story of where they came into science and STEM, and really how they use that scientific mindset in everyday life, whether they're still in the industry or not. And today, we have the honor of talking to Luca, who is the CEO and founder of Deorbit, and we're going to talk a little bit about what they provide as a solution for the booming space industry that's going to be coming here in the next 5 to 10 years, never mind what 20 years is going to give us. So welcome to the show, Luca. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Same here. So let's talk about you as a person. Where did you come from, and where did your journey into science start before you became the founder and CEO of Deorbit?
Well, it started a long time ago when I was 5 years old. So as probably many kids, I wanted to become an astronaut. And I remember very well when it happened, because I was with my uncle in the mountain and I was looking at the star and I said, what are those lights? And my uncle explained in a very scientific way what the star is. And I remember that I didn't understand, one thing of what he told me. But I remember that I thought, okay, I want to go to space and check out what the stars are. And then from that point, I start planning my life in order to get to space. So, like science school, high school with major in science, then space engineering, few masters in technical subjects like robotics, IT, and then PhD in advanced space propulsion. So a lot of let's say STEM in my life.
Absolutely. When you wanted to be an astronaut, was there a certain mission that you wanted to do, or was it really just getting up there to see what's there?
Yeah, so my goal was really to go, to experiment space. And I grew up with science fiction, right? So I read. So I think the first book that I read when I start, reading, it was a 1,400 pages of a science fiction book on a famous series here in Europe of science fiction books. And so I said, wow, this is really the future. So I want to be there, and I want to help building that future.
That's so great to hear. I mean, I started with science fiction as well. Star Trek, that was the one that really, I think, jump-started me, and even things like Back to the Future. So, science fiction, I think, helps start the seeds to get people interested to actually figure out how to do something like that. So that's great. So with Deorbit, what is the company? I guess let's do that. Let's do a quick review from you of what Deorbit is and what your mission is there with the company, how it started.
Yeah, so Deorbit has been created to create the first space logistics infrastructure. So they say the original thought was, space is going to become a very important piece of our existence as a society, as human society. If we think about ourselves and we project ourselves in, 500 years in the future, it's likely to think that we will be traveling space, having colonies, and moving from planet to planet. So I said, okay, if in 500 years we will be there, it means that we will start the roadmap to get there sooner or later. So why not now? But in order to do that, we are still missing an infrastructure that enable us to get there. And I believe the logistics infrastructure is what is missing. We take logistics for granted on Earth, but you think about even, if you who produce pens needs someone to pick up the pens at the factory, bring them to the distributor, and then to the local shop in which you can buy a pen for a reasonable amount of money. In space at the moment we are not there yet. So the original idea was to create this infrastructure, and of course, then you need the market, because companies apparently need to make money and pay salaries at the end of the month. So you need to find customers and markets. So what we did, instead of saying, okay, let's go straightforward into the final vision of space logistics infrastructure. Let's try to understand what's happening in the market. What are the markets that are appearing, and let's make sure that whatever we do today, it's good for customers that are existing today, but also a good piece of what we will need tomorrow. And this is why we started with space debris, and then moving satellites into space. Now we are transporting satellites in another locations in space, and next there will be the in-orbit servicing.
So I wonder if, I know with everything that's happened with COVID-19 this last year, I think so much more has been, the focus has been so much more on safety. And I think even logistics, to your point, I think before last year, so many of us kind of didn't even think about logistics. It was the unsung hero in the background. And as soon as something like the pandemic happened that screws up all the logistics, you realize just how important it is to have that structure. And, given how many satellites we already have in orbit, your video on your website was great. Website is DORBIT.space. And you can see the video there. But, other than a gut feeling of this industry could go somewhere, you put numbers out there that makes it real. 6,500 satellites launched and deployed in the last 60 years, with 23,000 estimated satellites to launch in the next 5 to 10. So just that blew me away, just seeing the numbers. I hadn't seen that before. Was that number part of what started the company, or did you find that number after going after the idea of we need this in place for the future?
Yeah, no, actually we found the number along the way, because when we started the company 10 years ago, so we are, very old new space company.
Yeah.
So we are still a young company, but in the new space, we are very old. When we started our business, there was no new space. I mean, new space word was not existing. Only giants, only traditional companies, governments were creating the space market at that time. But let's say I was lucky enough, part of my study, so I studied business in US, in Silicon Valley, and then I joined NASA there. It was 2009, okay? And then in 2009 at NASA, I was working in a project that was called the PhoneSat. So it was a small satellite, and we were using the Google Nexus 1 phones. Yeah, it was bigger than that. It was
bigger
not
than that, but this is where it's all going, right? Ultimately,
exactly. So, and in my team, there were also Chris Boschwitz and Will Marshall. Actually, they were my boss in that project. And and these two guys then created Planet Labs. That is one of the biggest satellite constellations existing today. So, and I understood that, wow, the market is changing, space is changing. So it may happen in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, but definitely it's not going, to happen in 10 or 20 years. So if we don't do something, either it will be too late or someone else will, right? So in 2010, Renato is the other founder that actually I met at NASA. We came back to Europe to start the company. So at the beginning was really, we were talking about space debris or logistics, and even the space agencies were laughing at the time, because they said, wow, this is science fiction, guys, go back to school, right? But what we are doing now, it's what was considered science fiction 10 years ago.
No, and I'm glad you're bringing this up. I mean, so I was in my aerospace engineering degree in the U.S. from 2008 till 2015, and I saw the transition happen while I was in school. And very much so in the academic space, it was the same idea. It was that science fiction, it's going to take forever for it to develop, because that's what everyone was used to. So it's really cool to hear that there were people at that time seeing it who branched off and said, let's take what we know and do something about it. Now, a decade later, you guys are in this position. What is it like having an old space, coming from the old space, and then creating a new space, culture and company? What has that journey been like?
Yeah, let's say I copied and pasted a lot from IT companies in Silicon Valley. So because now I'm saying something that probably will not be very popular, but satellites are becoming a commodity very soon. So and they are becoming more and more software. that means flexibility, versatility. Of course you need the hardware, but the way you design the hardware, the way you operate satellites, it's more similar to how we operate softwares rather than a unique piece of very high-tech hardware, right? So this is how we started the company. It wasn't very easy at the beginning because our first customers were traditional companies. So actually, I got. Right. I cannot, let's say, spell the name, but I say we got very big companies coming into the company to teach us how to do the work, right? So, but I have to say that actually was useful because we learned the concept of quality. That is something that not so often you can find in the new space community. And today I spend slightly more to apply these quality concepts, but it's paying back a lot. Because you have to transfer, so you don't have to operate like completely according to the old or the traditional quality aspect. You need to translate to the new space domain. But if you have some quality standards, then you know that you are taking care of potential issues that may happen in space. Because once you are there, there's nothing you can do. It's too late.
It's true. It's true. No, and that's a beautiful sentiment. I mean, I had so much angst and anxiety coming out of school that for the old ways, and of course I'm very new space minded. I talk about it a lot on the podcast here. We're very in depth into SpaceX and what Rocket Lab is doing, and so many other companies, especially like yourselves. But as we start launching human beings again into space, having the ability to do it in our own country, like that has now brought me back to thinking about NASA of the space shuttle era and the old space, why they were so gung-ho on those things of safety and quality. Like you said, once you're there, you're there. And if it's human beings on board or millions of dollars of a payload, you have to. So it's finding that balance of keeping what's good from the old days and being open-minded enough to make adjustments when it's needed.
Yeah, I think new space is like a teenager, right? So when if you remember, at least when I was a teenager, I was fighting with my parents every single day, right? And I said, you don't understand me, right? But then when I'm not a teenager anymore, unfortunately. So then I said, okay, maybe not everything that they were telling me is wrong. So probably something is good. And then I, let's say, used what they told me that I thought was good into something new that I created myself. So I think new space is approaching this. So he started as a teenager, and now he's understanding that if you really want to deliver a reliable business, because that's the ultimate goal, and a beneficial business for the entire society, then you need to make sure that you are capable of delivering a business. So quality will enter into the process more and more. It doesn't mean that we are going back to the 400 million satellites of the past era. We can still keep the model, but working in a different way, and this is already happening. Many companies are already following this trend.
Absolutely. And how do you see it over there in Europe? I know over here, a lot of what we're getting is, Europe is starting to catch up with the reusable rocket technology and seeing different options. I think there's a lot of, again, teenager reactions to, new space and old space and stuff like that. But I see a lot of promise with ESA and everything that's over there in Europe as far as space technology. How does it feel on the ground over there? I know you guys are a global company, but
that's a good point. Let's say the advantage of being in Europe is that you can see both what is happening in US and in Asia as well. Because when we people of space, let's say, we are a lot focused on what is happening in US and in Europe, but we should not forget what is happening in Asia. There's a huge and skyrocketing numbers of companies in the new space domain as well there. So, but let's say overall, the difference between the traditional space and the new space is that while the traditional space is still regional, so the European traditional space is, associated to Europe. The US is just associated to US and so on. The new space is actually global. So we are working a lot with US companies, with Asian companies, with African companies, like Australian companies, South American companies. So that's the beauty of new space. There are no real boundaries. So we go beyond the politics. Of course, there are limitations, because if you are like in US, you have some difficulties on, with Asia. If you are in Europe, you have some restriction with some nations, as that's normal. But let's say this is a good. So new space is really going beyond the past limitations. But I have to say, on some aspects, US, especially in the traditional space, is more advanced, but Europe is catching up. So I give you this example. The NASA is already contracting industries to buy services from them. And that's actually, I think, the evolution, right? Because at the beginning, NASA was part of the creation of the infrastructure. Now NASA is becoming the enabler of the commercial market. So Europe is going through this transaction right now. So they are becoming the enabler as well. So and that's actually a good point. And I'm expecting that this is going to happen at worldwide level. So Space Agency had a very important and fundamental role to create what we are using today. And now they are becoming enabling factor for the next generation of like space companies and so on.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I'm just so glad I don't get to talk to many people about this. So this is amazing. I'm on the board. I love the idea that new space has no boundaries. I never put it that way. So that's great. So let's talk about deorbit. Let's talk about some of the solutions that you guys have, and what challenges you're helping solve in this satellite market right now.
Yeah, let's say what we're doing right now, it's solving like a major issue that is a bottleneck for the exploitation of all the constellations that are being launched. That is basically getting into the right location in the least time possible. Because I mean, we know that the new space satellites are not lasting 15 years in space.
Right.
They have so
that's a great point.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that they last only 3 years, but let's say likely between 3 and 5, right? So if they are very well done and manufactured, this is pretty much. And also there are economic reasons behind, because you don't really want to have a satellite that can last 15 years. Because imagine to have internet on the satellite. I mean, I didn't have internet on my cell phone 15 years ago, so there's no point to have, it would be obsolete technology anyway. But let's say, so the issue that they have, if they waste several months or even 1 year to get to their final location, then they are sacrificing 1/3 of their revenues, and they are also postponing the revenues. That if you are a young company that venture back, postponing revenues is also a damage for you.
Right. Can we talk about some of the numbers? And I'm not sure what you can or can't share, even if it's a fake number that's close. What is an investment towards getting one of these in there? And then you said it could take a year before you're even in an orbital position to actually make use of it, right? Is that timeline correct?
Well, yeah. So let's say let's get into some real examples. So imagine you have a bunch of satellites, say 10 satellites in one rocket. You reach the right orbit, so you get to 500 kilometers orbit, and then you need to disperse your satellite in an equispaced way around the orbit, because you want your satellites in the right position there. Today, depends on the type of satellites. It may take between 6 and 10 months. Using the differential drag technique, right? And you may have motors on your satellites, but since your satellites are small, you don't really want to use the propellant. Yeah. Right. So you want to keep the propellant for the business, because if you decide to put a motor, it's because you need it for the business, not just for moving around. And that's one aspect. And this, we can do it in less than 4 weeks. So we did it in 4 weeks last year, in 2 weeks this year already in January. And that's really an amazing savings of time, 85% less time. But also, if you need to go, you have 10 satellites to put in one orbit and another 10 to put in a different plane, in a different orbit. Then today you need to buy 2 rockets, one from one orbit and another rocket for another orbit. If you are lucky enough that the locations in which you need to go, the 2 different orbits or different planes, are reachable by rockets. It's not trivial. We can do it in one mission. So we have a sort of cargo that we can fill up with satellites. We can transport up to 400 pounds of cargo. And we can, with the current version, that is still the medium size of our cargo. And then we can go basically anywhere. We can theoretically, we can even reach the moon if it's needed. No one is paying us to go to the moon right now.
Right, and that's when you would go, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not going there, but let's say, technically speaking, with that, there is the possibility to get there. Let's say we are focusing more in LEO, where all the constellations are being positioned. And the interesting story is that satellite operators are now experimenting new business models, because there are orbits that I was not able to use before, and now I can get there and change my business model in order to get there. And the time that I save may allow me not to have a lot of backup satellites, or they are really coming to us with a lot of crazy and smart ideas that we are very happy to realize.
That's so exciting.
And this is what we are doing now. But the same cargo can be used for many other aspects. So another issue of young startups that are, they get some money from investors to develop a piece of hardware, but then the investors, I'm pretty sure, and I would like to lose the bet if someone actually say the contrary. I'm pretty sure that investors are not giving the total amount of money that they need to build the entire constellation. It's more likely that they will tell the company, okay, I give you some money, show me that your technology is working. But at that point, you need to, the proof of concept need to be done in space. And today, to get to space, it takes between 2 to 5 years and $2 to $6 million. That's a huge amount of money that definitely investors, they may be willing to give it to you, but if you can use it for your business, is better. You can put your technology in our cargo. In 6 months, you are in space and you are, let's say, validating your technology. We already did in 2017 for 3 customers, last year for another 2, and now we have 2 very weird cameras that we are testing for companies that are working very well. I cannot provide you more details, but very interesting companies. And this is one aspect. But then imagine what you can do when you deliver all the satellites in orbit. You have tested all the technology that you are transporting. You still have a very good asset in orbit that you can use for many other aspects.
Absolutely, and so a lot of my experience comes from 3D printing and iterative design. It's a lot of where I've learned I think the most out of school, and being able to experiment quickly and inexpensively is so important to developing an idea. And that's ultimately what you're talking about. Is okay, if someone's going to invest the money in this, we're going to test out an idea. It's got to be quick, and it's got to be money, especially with the way the world has turned in the last year. People don't necessarily or have that money laying around to throw at a 2 to 5 year investment, or want to do that if they do have the money. So that's, it's great that you guys are in this position. Not great that the world has turned this way, but giving the kind of the strength of where you guys originally placed this company 10 years ago. It's great to hear. I think there's to think that orbitally we haven't even begun to innovate on where we can put things. That's super exciting. So let's talk about logistics. So if people start using these new orbits and start expanding, how is D-Orbit specifically suited to help with that? Because I can imagine with 23,000 in the next 10 years, and that's just what we guess now. That seems like we could get into trouble really quickly if we don't take care of it.
Yeah, that's right, and actually the 23,000 is excluding, the big constellation by
Oh, SpaceX and
SpaceX,
Starlink.
Amazon,
Oh,
and
so
Virgin,
they
right?
just
So
doubled that number then. Good
yeah,
Lord.
triple actually. So you get three times more satellite. That's really so. From one side, you have an issue of congestion in orbit.
Mm,
That's the first. So let's say space traffic management is going to be required, not just in terms of like regulations, but also in terms of services. So you need to make sure that you are able to deliver the satellites as fast as possible because you don't want to get stuck into the congestion, but also the space debris issue, right? So we already
right,
have this major issue already existing with just a fraction of the satellites that will be in the near future.
right.
If we don't act quickly, not just because we have a solution for satellites that are not yet in space, so like an intelligent device that you can install on the satellite and is capable of removing the satellite even if the satellite is not working anymore. But
Which is amazing.
that's good for avoiding to create new trash in space.
Right, right.
But what about the trash that is already there? Then you will need what I call in orbit servicing, that is, it's not just extending the life of satellites or like rescuing satellites or moving one satellite from one position to another, but it's also what is called in our sector is called active debris removal. So the ability to go after an existing satellites in orbit, grab the satellite that is not functioning anymore, and then removing. And that's going to be a huge opportunity for companies like mine, right?
Yeah.
So to get into that market, but also a huge bottleneck for satellite operators if there are no solutions about that. Because I think if you have, let's say, 100 satellites, I'm not saying 1,000, let's say 100 satellites only, right? And then you need to put some backup satellites because, of course, some of your satellites will die unexpectedly. And let's assume that you are very good on manufacturing your satellite and you have 90% reliability at the end of life. So let's say that you have 10 satellites that are not working in a year. And then what happens? Those 10 satellites will start drifting. So then you need to avoid collisions with your own satellite. So it is your problem. It's not someone else's problem.
Right.
So the first problem is yours. So if you have propellant, you have to sacrifice propellant that was theoretically supposed to be used for your business to avoid collisions. And then you have 10 satellites. The second year, you may have another. So you launch more satellites to compensate, and then you have another 10 satellites that are still there. And then you have the double of probability of collision events, and then the triple and so on. So you need to get rid of those satellites as fast as possible when they stop working. The issue is that you don't know which one is going to stop working, right? So because if you
Right.
know, you just remove it before. So you put
Right.
some more propellant, and then you
Yeah.
you remove it, like 1 hour before like stopping, you just remove it. So you
Wow.
need someone that is offering the service to go
Hmm.
after those defunct satellites and remove it safely.
That's fascinating. My mind was just racing, thinking about all the possibilities and like the position that the satellite market is. It's almost like the early days of all the plastic that we started using, and recyclability, and not understanding what we were doing in the first place. And then, organizations that do create some carbon, they'll plant a tree to offset it. And I feel like we're in this kind of realization in that in the satellite market where, if you do 100 satellites and you know you're going to have a 90% success rate, do you have to drop it down to 99 and toss up another satellite that's just meant for deorbiting? Or it's like, how do you counteract that in the equation of your investment into going into space?
Yeah. I think there are several aspects, but I like to focus more on the economic aspects because I think
Mm,
it's because of course many organizations are working to set up new rules, but I
mm,
believe that companies will act first because they have an economic interest of
yeah.
solving this issue. So, but even imagine just monitoring the defunct satellites. So even
Mm,
already today, the era of private monitoring companies has already started. So our launch that we did in January, There were, on the same rocket, we were more than 130 satellites, I guess. So a lot of satellites delivered in basically one area of space.
Right.
And it was really, really difficult to capture your satellite at the beginning, within all the cloud. So many companies start using private companies, selling services, using their radars, their telescopes, to capture your satellite and provide you the positioning of your satellite. And this helped many companies, to speed up the LEO operation. But now it means that in the future, satellite operators that leave their satellites for 20 plus years in space, then they will need to pay for that service. And they need to take into account the cost. And it will be for 20 years. It's a lot of money, right? So that you need to put in your balance sheet. Then, as I mentioned before, the economics of avoiding collisions, the economics of third-party liability, that today is not yet a recognized issue. But the more the private companies will be in space, the more this will be an issue. Because, government with government is more difficult. They will find a solution. They will help each other, to mitigate. But if another company disrupt the business of another companies, I think shareholders from one company will say, "Oh, wow! Now we want back the money that we have lost." So it's more probable that this the new space law will also start growing. So I think the third-party liabilities and all these other aspects will be very important, and this will all help companies to find innovative solutions. We just mentioned a couple, right? But customers will definitely put on the table creative solutions that will help them to run their business safely and without compromising the ecosystem. Because what you said before, the space circular economy, it's already started, and it's happening very fast because the damages that we are creating in space are very fast as well.
That's fascinating. My mind is racing with all the possibilities that are going to come in the next 5 years, never mind decades. But I am blown away by the speed of how fast everything is going. It seems so stagnant for such a long time. And moving forward, I'm really glad, and this is why I'm so glad we get to talk to like a wide variety of people working in STEM. I think your focus on the economics of it is so important, and I think it's a reality that many people, when they go out of academia, realize, even if they're looking for funding for research, it really ultimately, good or bad, comes down to the money involved, whether you're making a profit or you're getting funding. And I think it's a reality that a lot of us struggle with originally. Was that something, did you always have that mindset of the science, is driven by the economics, or is that something you learned along the way?
Well, let's say I had to learn by myself. Let's say when I was 5 years old, I was used to sell toys outside of the kindergarten, right? So, and I was selling my toys at first. And then I was selling also the toys of my friends and I was taking a percentage. That's crazy.
Hey.
It was even before.
So this is in your DNA. This is
I think it is my. Actually, I paid for my universities trading technologies in internet. Like buying from one nation and then selling to another part. So, and that actually allowed me to pay for my university. So I think it was something that I had to learn in the hard way, right? Because I couldn't afford to, the university at that time. So I had to do it on the hard way. But I think it was good anyway. It was a very good experience because when I start approaching investors and when I start approaching customers, I mean, the first thing that you need to understand is what they really need. Actually, even more than need, because if they have a need, it means that there are already solutions that you can improve. But my role in the orbit especially is to create something that is not existing. So you need to understand what are their problems. and needs and problems are not similarities. So when you have a problem, you may accept the problem. So for example, now we are used to waste 1/3 of the light of the satellites to get in position,
Right.
and we know that we cannot get anywhere in space. So when we design like our business plan as a satellite operator, we say, okay, these are the orbits that are available, and we need to make business with that. It's just a compromising. But when you understand that that's the problem that they have, because they are compromising the potential of their business, and you free them from that boundary, and now, the 1 year after, they can put their satellites wherever they think is more useful for their business, then actually you got it. So you create something that is new. And this is the logistics, basically. And the logistics, even on Earth, they are doing that. They listen to the customers, they understand what is the need, and they work together, and they develop, they progress together.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that. It's a learning experience, and I think even old space is learning a lot of that right now with what new space is offering. Like, just to use SpaceX as the example, I mean, the fact they're able to tap into all these different things, the constellation market, heavy lift rocket. I mean, the Falcon Heavy, it was kind of it was like, let's see what we can do. It wasn't, they're just kind of piggybacking off what they did. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that, but there's Starship. I mean, all these things that just have been, I think, if you think about first principles, when you root down the biggest problems, they're really good at focusing on that and building a business around that to build the next thing. And you guys have this sea of solutions for the market that's going to explode here and is already exploding. What else is in the next, let's just say 5 years for you guys? Are you even thinking of it in a 5-year, like, is there a zone that you're thinking for the next progress for deorbit?
Yeah. So let's say definitely the angle of space debris is always important for us. So
Yep.
we started our business. So our very first product was to mitigate the issue of space debris. Then, of course, was an important strategic step for us, because we needed to build the technology that we are still using, and but we need also to find a product to sell on the market. So that was the perfect points in which we can start. But still, debris is still an important aspect, and I also think space debris is a strategic market for the orbit, not just for the orbit, because if we are alone, it means that the market is not very good. So, but luckily there are other companies that are coming, not just in the logistics, but also getting into the active debris removal. Actually, there was an amazing launch done very recently. I know that I cannot mention the company, but it's a very good company, very good job. I cannot mention the name, but I'm going to talk with him soon. So hopefully we will see a lot of results also in the active debris removal very soon, and we want to be part of it. So our next step, so today we are exploiting the current market, that is making sure that the satellites are positioned as fast as possible, avoiding to leave, trash in orbit. And as a next phase, there are all the what we call advanced service. So what we can do with your asset that is already in space to help the satellite operators that you were transporting, or the other satellites that are already there, okay, to do a better job in terms of delivering service on ground. But then, and this is already basically happening, but then the next step will be to enter into the in-orbit servicing. So we don't have all the technology, so we build pretty much all the technology in-house so far.
That's amazing.
We don't have all the technology for the in-orbit servicing, so we are going to work with partners on that. Amazing partners, really great companies that immediately understood what new space means. And this is going to happen when the market will appear. I'm expecting that the in-orbit servicing, well, it's already, I think, a market in GEO, and it's becoming quickly a market in LEO as well in few years from now.
Do you see, so I guess just to talk about a few other things that I especially with your passion of becoming an astronaut, I have to ask, have you applied to ESA's astronaut corps? Have you applied to that new application that's out there for the next generation?
So I cannot apply now because apparently I'm too old to become an astronaut. So let's say
What?
in Europe, well, yeah. So I have to say, in US, you have a contest pretty much every year, and usually
Right.
30 astronauts are selected. About, yeah. In Europe, you have one chance in a life, and usually you get
Interesting.
like 4 positions. So I did the selection in 2008, and that's why I studied a lot, right? So
Yeah.
like the master degree, all the other masters, the PhD, and so on. Well, I also served in the army as an officer of the parachutist corps, right? So
Mm,
everything was done according to the objective of becoming an astronaut. So in
right.
2008, the contest was out, and I applied. We were about 10,000 people in Europe, and
Mm.
for 4 positions. Well, if I'm here, I'm not an astronaut, so you know how the story ended. But let's say I went, let's say, very close to the end, but not close enough. And that's
Yeah.
actually the reason why the orbit exists. Because at that point, I
Interesting.
said, "Oh wow, what should I do with my life now?" Right? So
Yeah.
why don't build my own spaceship and go to space on my own? I
I
said,
love
well,
it.
if I need to go there, then I need some knowledge, some business knowledge. So I need to study business. I had 2 companies at the time, but they were very technical companies.
Mm.
Like a drone company that we were using, like building drones for like service to industry, and
Mm.
the other one was producing special effects for the movie sectors. We also went
Oh
to the
wow.
Oscar. We didn't win, but it was a like
That's awesome.
cool experience. I mean, to deal with
Yeah.
directors, guys, space is a way more easy, way more easy. But
Wow.
anyway, yeah.
Really?
But anyway, so I said, what should I do now? So I went to study business in Silicon Valley. Then I started working at NASA. I said, okay, now we are ready to start the company that sooner or later is capable of creating a spaceship in which I will be the passenger. So
I
that's
love it.
why.
I love it. And there's all these opportunities cropping up. I mean, we just had Dear Moon. We've got the Inspiration 4 mission with SpaceX and that St. Jude research. I think that's just the beginning of all these other opportunities that are getting up there. Of course, flying on your own ship. I mean, that just makes all the sense in the world to me. So that's awesome. Um, that's fascinating. I mean, there's so many of us that have taken a path that was not the original path that we thought we were going to take in this space industry. So, but it's the journey, right? Everything that you've learned now has given you more capability to do it even more your way than probably you would have done it if you had gone the traditional route, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think a good message to deliver also to who is listening to us. It's, in the past, and I'm not saying 50 years ago, I'm saying like 10 years ago, if you were like a space engineer and then you started working in, I don't know, in the oil and gas industry, that's it, right? So you
Right.
couldn't go back to space. Now it's not like that anymore. Because like in my company, yes, we have space engineers, but they are like the minority in the company. We have
Right.
electrical engineering, mechanical engineers, telecommunication engineering. I mean, we have a lot of engineers, definitely engineers
Sure.
and PhD, of course. But let's say we don't stick only to space. So we need to learn from what the other industries are doing here, because they are doing very well, and understand how we can translate it into the space sector. This
Absolutely.
is what we're doing. So the competence in other domains are more and more important into the space
Mm.
sector.
Now, is that a function of diversity of thought and experience and just like everyone brings a new way of thinking? Is that useful and valuable? I think it is, but is that useful and valuable when you're solving complex solutions that you guys are doing?
Yes, exactly. That's the point. And I would add also the fact that those sectors exist, since way before the new space
Mm.
sector started. So they had to experiment innovation and solutions in their own domain. Maybe not everything is applicable because space is, it's very, I mean, particular and unique environment, but
Right.
still you can learn the methodology, and especially the people coming from there. They are used to solve like issues and to work in a like production with certain requirements, uh,
Mm.
to find the cheapest solution. but still reliable. All these aspects are becoming more and more important in the new space industry. So, and definitely the expertise in the new space industry, it's almost non-existing, because the first new space company started, well, let's say the Orbit 10 years ago. You take Planet, you take Spire, you take other, sorry, I shouldn't say the names, but I mean, if you look at the oldest new space companies, they are not more than 10, 12 years old. So it's
Right.
the real experts are very few. So you need to learn from other experts that have this experience and these capabilities, as you mentioned, in other domain, and attract them into the space sector.
Absolutely. No, Luca, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed talking with you. I don't want to take all your time here, but do you have any last thoughts for people? What are you excited about in the next year that's coming up with all the things that are happening in space right now? Any last words for the folks out there?
Yeah. So let's say if I have to express my pride, or like why I'm happy about working in the space sector, it's because now space is really for everyone. So what I'm seeing now, that everybody understands space. They understand that it's a service that will create benefits for the entire society. And that, like 10 years ago, most of the people was thinking, why should we spend $1 into space when we have a lot of issues here on Earth? Now, it's more common to hear, yes, but most of the solutions that we're using today are coming from space. So if we invest in space, all the society will benefit from that. And 80% of the technology we are using today is directly or indirectly coming from space. So, and this is really make me proud of what we are doing, because we are enabling satellite operators today, but we are enabling also the human expansion in a sustainable space. And sustainable is a very important word, because whatever we do in space, let's not forget how it works here on Earth. Let's not forget that any business need to be in a, let's say, closed loop. So, that this circular economy should be applied in space as well. But I see a lot of effort going in this direction already, when it took decades on any other sectors. In space, is already happening. And this is really amazing. Smart people, innovation. When you don't know that is not possible, then it becomes possible. And that's what space is offering to young engineers and even non-engineers that want to work in the space business today.
That's an amazing sentiment. Thank you. One other thing, because a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, not a lot, but a good portion, are people who either started in STEM and ended up in a different industry, or wanted to go into space and ended outside of it, or never thought it was possible and are now looking at it. As someone that's running a company, hiring people in this new space environment, what kind of suggestion do you have for someone that either doesn't have the experience or has been out for a while and is applying to work for a company like let's say D-Orbit?
Yeah, well, let's say, first of all, if you have a career in STEM anyway, but you are not working in the space industry, there are no boundaries at all. Zero boundaries. So as I mentioned, we are hiring people from automotive, oil and gas, IT, agriculture. I mean, any sector. If you have an expertise and you know how to solve problems, definitely space is really open for you as well. If you don't have a STEM background, right, so that it may happen that you decide to go for more humanistic topics, well, still, it may be slightly more difficult, I have to say, because we still have a lot of, let's say, technical expertise, even in the sales people. But not everyone is an engineer. Even in our company, we have lawyers in our companies. Actually, we have space law. So, for example, if you are a lawyer, think about space law, because it's going to become big. It's going to become big.
No one's touched it yet. Yeah, no one's touched space law yet.
Exactly, right. So it's a virgin market. So that's important. Or if you have knowledge in finance or administration, human resource, I mean, space companies are companies. So they have the
Yeah.
same needs of any other company. So look after the opportunities, not just for engineers, because there are so many opportunities. Like I cannot sell what we are looking for now, but we are looking for both STEM and non-STEM people right now. So if you go on our website and you look for job positions, you find, I wouldn't say half and half, but that definitely 30% of the positions are for non-STEM people. So welcome in the
Great.
orbit. We are waiting for you guys. So if you
Amazing, amazing. No, and you said something, there's something that people that don't work in STEM may not understand, but in general, engineers and scientists aren't best communicators. And they, and that's not a fault. I think it's just a balance of, hey, if you're that smart, you got to keep room in your head for you got to kind of toss some things out. But there is a huge opportunity for people who are just able to communicate between teams or to the people outside the company to bring them into that I've seen in my own career. I've been lucky that I've got a mix of both, but that to me seems like a place that there's a lot of people, whether it's sales or human resources, that would be super valuable in a company in new space.
Absolutely. Actually, communication is one of the most important topics, not just communicating, and posting on the social. That's still important, way more important than in the past, but also communicating with customers. Customers are your most important resource. So if you don't know how to communicate with them, then you may sign a contract, but then you don't get to the second one. So that's one aspect. And definitely you don't need to be an engineer to do that, but not just with customers. You have shareholders, you have the other stakeholders, so the community, the local community, you have the government, but also the internal communication. And this has to be done through like people management. And so there are many aspects in which communication is important, but not just communication. There are many other capabilities that people without a STEM background can make a difference in a company working in space. I mean, now that governments are talking about based on the moons or like colonies on Mars, then you need psychologists, you need architects, you need, I mean, you name it,
It's
you
infinite.
got it, right? So
Yeah.
So as I said, there are really no boundaries. So just give it a try. Maybe not with the first company, maybe with the second one, but definitely you will find a position that actually will allow you to use your superpower in a space company. And this is good for you, and this is good for the company.
Absolutely. Luca, thank you so much. This has been super inspiring. I'm all jazzed up over here. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking about Deorbit and your origin story in STEM and science, and inspiring people to get involved. I mean, I talk about it so much, I feel like I'm in a bubble sometimes. But to hear someone else say the same, it's so great. It's so refreshing. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was really a pleasure, and let's keep in touch, and
Absolutely.
and we will have a lot of more stories in the future to tell. So let's keep in touch.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Where can everyone find? So Deorbit, DORBIT.space. Is there anywhere else, social media, where they can find you?
Yes, so we have we have a LinkedIn channel, we have an Instagram channel, and a Facebook channel. And you always, if you search Deorbit, DORBIT or D-ORBIT, then you will find us.
Awesome. Thank you, Luca, so much. Everybody out there, spread love and spread science. Be well, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Awesome.